I believe I may be, and against all of my wishes, entering a slight reading slump, which is very bad news because I have a lot of arcs to get through. And I'm in the middle of one now, and I can feel myself going into the slump. However, before this awful sensation came around, I ploughed through all three of these. Now, Christian sent me these, I want to say 2 months ago, there or thereabouts, along with a bunch of other ones that he'd written. And I read all of those, and then before I could get to Maniac Cop, my Kindle broke. So, thanks to Amazon's wonderful customer service, I've only just got my Kindle back. So, I thought the first thing I'll do is I'll dive straight into the Maniac Cop trilogy. Now, I had never heard of these movies. My parents had. They started giggling when I mentioned it, and they're like, yeah, that was not a good film. But, you know, everything Christian writes is excellent, quite frankly, or at least very, very good. So I'm doing a separate video for each of these because they are differing levels of quality. And I don't mean Christian's writing, I mean the actual movie concept and the plot that he has to work with. So there's a maniac cop, and he's killing people, and there's no explanation given, basically, is how it starts. But usually in a horror movie, you'll have somebody who is in peril and being robbed or assaulted or something along this nature. And then from out of the mist comes the hero of the piece, and he takes them down, and then he looks at the person in trouble and he just like nods or just walks away or something. Yeah, this doesn't happen here. He kills the innocent person every time. Which was, a new approach for me. And as I say, no real explanation is given until much later on in the book. And even then, it's kind of a half-assed sort of, the sort of thing you could imagine being an excuse for a rampage in an 80s horror movie. It revolves around, it begins revolving around Frank McRae, who is a detective lieutenant. And he's investigating these murders. And, it isn't going anywhere. And then we have a detective who is banging a co-worker, and his wife finds out, literally catches them in a motel, and she's worried that he's the maniac cop, but in reality he's just banging one of the other cops. And he gets locked up. Basically, they think he is the maniac cop. Nobody wants to listen to the possibility that there's this undead guy wandering about murdering people, especially in a cop's uniform. And he's in full dress uniform with the gloves and everything. And the cop he's banging, Teresa, she believes that it's an undead guy. And it basically revolves around them dodging this maniac cop. Not all of them successfully, as you would expect in a horror B movie from the 80s. Or actually any decade. It sort of culminates at the end of the book in this place where he's been hiding out. And, obviously there's two more, so the ending is ambiguous. It was a good read. I will say it was a good read. I very much enjoyed it, and I read it in a day. The movie, I would say there is no way in hell I would ever watch that movie. Never watch that movie. Christian has a way, and I've said this many times before, he has a condition which doesn't allow him to picture things in his mind. But for someone who has that condition, he writes more vividly and more descriptively than many people that I've read. And I don't know how he does it, but you can see in the pages what I'm sure were terrible special effects of the time. You can see the scene playing out in your brain, if you don't have aphantasia, obviously. And you can imagine like the really poor prosthetics and the too pink blood and stuff like that. He really does bring these things to life. And of course, it's the typical micro storytelling throughout, giving people miniature backstories and whatnot. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Certainly enough to immediately go on to the next one anyway. So I gave this one 4 stars. And I was really impressed that he continues to have this ability to create a good solid read out of what I'm sure is a pile of garbage. I don't know how else I could put that. So on to the next one.